Yeah, I think Dipti, we can probably start now.
Yeah, one second. You can start.
Okay. Thank you, Dipti. Welcome everyone. This is our fourth session for C conversations in this semester. We are in the program of C City. C City is this School of Environment and Architecture's outreach program. And as a part of this program, we organize events, lectures, symposia, and exhibitions in order to engage with the larger artistic and cultural discursive sphere within and outside the city. And under this program, we have see conversations and see emerging practices where we invite a range of people from different discursive and cultural disciplines to help us converse and expand our idea about architecture and spatial processes as well as understanding. Uh, as a part of this program, we have initiated curated talks since last 2 semesters under several thematic ideas. 2 semesters ago, a semester ago, we curated a symposium on South Asian architectures, where we invited people from all over the South Asian region to talk and participate and expand knowledge on South Asian architecture and landscapes. And then we did a series on the languages of architecture in the and trying to expand drawing and expression as a in architecture as a way of entering into architecture and the design of spaces in an expanded fashion. And in line of those thematic talks, this semester, um, as you all must be following, we have introduced the idea of building agency. And before I actually give you a very short introduction about this program of building agency, I want to acknowledge the fact that it has been our this semester's talks have been generously supported partly by Urban Center Mumbai. Urban Center Mumbai is a part of the Urban Center Trust, which is a young not-for-profit organization established in 2020. It was established by city practitioners, and it aims to build capacities and create democratic platforms to achieve and demonstrate excellence in the planning and design of rapidly urbanizing urban agglomerations in India. And we are very happy that they are partnering with us in the program and curatorial theme of building agency, which aims to address the question of how does architecture become relevant for and in society today. And there are two main dimensions to this question, which I've been introducing over the last 3 talks also, and for the sake of for the benefit of those who might be joining us afresh, I would like to repeat them. That we aim to address through these series of talks how does spatial design shape societal relationships, and on the other hand, how could a spatial practitioner contribute responsibly and potently into the emerging complexities of spatial operation today? So, this series invites a range of spatial practitioners who have been formulating visions, trajectories, questions, methods, and processes through which what we say as the environmental apparatus may be configured afresh. And we hope that these discussions will offer useful directions for contemporary spatial pedagogy and practice. As a part of this series so far, we have had 3 presentations. By the first one was by Chalchal Agency, a Columbia and Ahmedabad-based practice, who spoke to us about light infrastructures. And then we had Matter from Goa, who spoke to us about the role of publications, content creation, and opening architecture through those dimensions along with practice and the critical kind of constant review of practice. And in the last session, we had social design agency. We had Swati Janu, and she spoke to us about how the role of architecture needs to, or in pedagogical processes, we need to look at large scale urban planning policies and also look at small scale interventions and try to find a way of marrying across them to create more impactful and meaningful kind of practice, building meaningful architectural practice in terms of broadening one's agency. In that line of presentations, today we have another very interesting practice. And we have with us Bhawna Jaimini from Community Design Agency. And she's Community Design Agency is an architecture and design organization that collaborates with diverse communities in need to create sustainable change. And before I invite Bhavna, I would like to give her a short introduction. Bhavna Jaimini is an architect, writer, and researcher based in Mumbai. And she works with Community Design Agency on projects that seek to improve the built habitat of some of the most marginalized communities in urban areas of India. And using participatory tools is one of the key methods that they employ in achieving this goal. She's deeply passionate about gender rights and believes in wearing her politics on a sleeve. And today, she's going to talk about building on the margins. Her talk is titled "Building on the Margins," and she'll talk through through stories of three marginalized communities that she has worked with, and how that process has brought about or attempted to bring about change and transition in the status quo of things. So, with that, I would like to invite Bhavna to present and also talk more about her practice. So, welcome, Bhavna. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anush. Thank you for inviting me. I am very excited to be here. One is because I really appreciate what C is doing in terms of creating a new education pedagogy, and the topic that you've chosen for this semester C conversation, building agency, is something that is very close to my heart. It's something that I've tried to understand, inquire through my practice for last 6-7 years. Not a lot of years in practice, but so here we are. I'm gonna, before we start, I just want to speak a little about why I started doing what I do. And it's actually a funny story, but I thought, like, since it's a Friday evening, we need to make this talk not like very serious. And it is what it is. It was in 2012, I was doing my internship, and it was at a interesting office. Like, they did a mix of both commercial and sustainable work. At that time, I still wanted to design, like, like a traditional architect. And midway in the internship, I was sent to a client who was designing their third or fourth farmhouse, and I spent 1.5 hours talking to the client about their toilet. And I came back thinking, is this why I'm spending, like, sleepless night talking to people, talking to rich people about their toilets? I'm sure they, and that day I made a promise to myself that come what may, I will sell burgers, but I will not design for rich people.
Mm.
It was, in my naivety, I said that, but I think in the long run, it paid me because it made me angsty to look for architecture in different ways than it was taught. That way, that is why I said I'm so interested in C pedagogy, because looking back, I thought it would be interesting if I was taught like that, like what C is doing right now. So anyway, here I am. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just let me know. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, I want to start with before I share the work that we do at Community Design Agency, I would like to start with an experience of, understanding marginalization and how I came to understand, like, what spatial marginalization is. And, what we see is often the result of a lot of cultural, social, economic, and political reasons that happen. And usually as architects, we're very much trained to look at spatial marginalization in terms of, oh, it's a slum, it's informal settlement. But I feel somewhere we lack an understanding to understand, what are the cultural challenges, political challenges, economic challenges that is driving that spatial marginalization. So this is a story. This is a community in Gujarat. It's called Vascoda. I I got in touch with them while we were working on a housing program under the Rajiva Vas Yojana, and where Hunarshwala Foundation, with the organization I was working with that time, had uh, was working on redeveloping 300 homes and was in the process of rebuilding 1,000 more homes, and under which 200 families of Vansfoda also were picked up because they were one of the most underserved and underprivileged. They didn't have proper homes, they didn't have water, they didn't have electricity. Even though we tend to merge all the slums under one category, and that was the first time I saw that there are better slums and better informal settlements, and they were absolutely what you can imagine when you think of poverty in that sense. This is the core city of Bhuj, where you have the lake, where you have the old city, and then from there, after the earthquake, the city started to grow. And interestingly, Vasfoda community is on the outskirts, and they've been on the outskirts ever since they came in the late 70s and early 80s, was when they migrated from South Gujarat. South Gujarat is the bamboo rich and the greener part of Gujarat, while Kutch is the desert, is a very desert climate. Vas means bamboo, and Forna means splitters, and their name actually carries their identity, which means that they're bamboo splitters and bamboo weavers. And what happened in the 80s, and actually much before 80s, when the Forest Right Act was implemented, was that for a short period, which actually was many years, the government started recognizing bamboo as timber. And when FR Forest Act was applied, these communities could not go and access bamboo as freely as they could before. And then the government sort of tried to find like a middle ground where they thought, let's not let them get bamboo freely from the forest, but let's give them some subsidized bamboo so that they can still continue their livelihoods. That continued for about another 10 years, and about till late 70s or 80s, government forgot about that. There are these communities who have traditional livelihoods are attached to bamboo. And by the time changes came to, and now Forest Act has been amended, and bamboo is no longer timber, it is grass. But by the time that happened, the communities had already lost their livelihoods, and they had no option but to look for other jobs. So that's how the Vasfoda community, which is mostly in South Gujarat, sort of started spreading everywhere and looking for menial jobs. And they came to Gujarat in Kutch, yeah, outside Bhuj, and this was their settlement. So it was very interesting to see that the settlement looks like something very rudimentary, something which is very temporary. And when I asked them that how old is the settlement, they told me that it's more than 30-40 years. And if a settlement is 30-40 years, you would see that people slowly do bring in some cement and some bricks to like lay claim on the land. And I was really surprised that they hadn't done anything, and they continue to live in this condition like they were. The reason was that the settlement, the land that the settlement occupied, was private land, and the land belongs to a lot of industrialists on the of Bhuj, who let them stay on the condition that they would make them move every couple of years. They did not want them to move because they needed cheap labor. So there was like a barter system that, oh, this is our land, we will let you be here. But whenever there was a need in their factories, they would make the women and the kids and even sometimes men work there for free. So that this relationship sort of you know didn't let the people settle fully, and they couldn't go anywhere because they had this if they leave, who knows whether they will get, they will lose whatever they have. So when I entered the community under the project called the Slum Archiving Project, and while because Hunashala Foundation was doing a massive redevelopment project, it was Slum Archiving Project was an attempt to understand slums and archive the lives of the community as they were, because they were anticipating that soon so many houses will be built, and whatever struggle, whatever culture these communities having, these settlements would go away. And it was also an attempt to show the rest of the city that uh, uh, these are not freeloaders, because most of the middle class, low middle class people think that slum dwellers would uh, government should not be giving them houses, government should not be giving them special subsidies to make their houses. But it was an attempt to also showcase that the communities give a lot to the cities, and in turn it is what they receive is not enough. So I started working with the community and realized that after the slum archiving project was finished, we archived their history, geography, and that's why I learned a lot about the histories of how their marginalization was linked to the Forest Act. Then, because they were on the edge of the city, there were no schools. The kids were there were a lot of kids who were employed in these factories. So their parents, there was a high alcohol problem. The women were rat pickers. The fathers worked as cleaners in trucks, because on the highway there was a municipal school, but because the settlement was nestled between railway lines on one side and a national highway on the other, the the community lost two children while trying to cross the railway lines and while crossing the highway, and which caused a lot of fear in the community, and they stopped sending their kids to school. So we started this little program where we thought, that okay, the kids can't go to school. Why can't we bring the school to the kids? And we initially started a makeshift school where a teacher would come. The former mayor of Bhuj decided to support the teacher's salary so that there is some learning the kids can do. And later, for 6 months the school ran, and because it you can see the structure, like we decided that maybe now it is time to build them a structure. So I presented this to the community that your kids are studying under a shed. Why would you like to build something for them? And they were very excited. The kids were very excited. It was not much, it was just a small structure, but they were very excited by the thought of building together. But we didn't have any money, and one donor came forward, said that I can give you all this bamboo that you need to build. And because they were bamboo, since the community were bamboo splitters and bamboo weavers, we thought would you be you don't have to contribute any money, but would you be able to at least contribute through labor? And the men were like, yes, but you will have to do it in Navratri, because Navratri is a time where the men don't work at all, and they all sit at home and fast. And they said that okay, let's build it. So we decided the initial donor, the amount that we received to build the school was 10,000 rupees. But with that 10,000 rupees, we started the construction. The women came forward. They did the puja. They were very excited. Kids. And this is no. I don't condone child labor, but they were so excited. We just couldn't stop them from contributing. And these were actually the older kids to see were kids from Karigar Shala. Karigar Shala is a masonry and carpentry school which Hunar Shala has started for school dropouts. And since it was Navratri, everyone was in a giving spirit, and the kids said that okay, we will come and give our services for free to build the school. So they came and did the plinth and put up the precast columns, and the community put the structure. And while designing, we were very conscious of the fact that the structure has to be very simple, and the structure doesn't have to be very complicated, because even though they had bamboo skills, they've not been in touch with bamboo for a long time. And Kutch is not a bamboo rich place. So usually the bamboo that they use is green and soft, and the bamboo that we were getting in Kutch was like very hard and dry, and which couldn't be used for a lot of weaving that they were used to. So we kept it very simple. We designed it with them. We said, okay, we just need something that you can do, and they put this all together within just within just a span of 3 days. I'm sorry, I don't have pictures of the. We were so excited. I don't have pictures of the build school, but this was on the day when we had an inauguration. Um a policewoman came to inaugurate it. The kids were doing rangoli, and yeah, it was great. It was one of the highest point of my life, because I felt, oh my god, like this is so great. This is the power of community. This is what, if people come together, can do. But there are also learnings that I would like to share, is that the program didn't run. The teacher continued to come for another year, and then the program sort of collapsed, because for multiple reasons. And when I look back at the project, I felt that uh, I still conceived the project as an architect. That when I went into the community, I looked for things that could be built. I looked for things that I was still very new, and I think I was somewhere approaching the whole project from the point of view that you know something can be, there is you can solve certain problems by building. But that is what this project taught me, that you need to put the need of the community at the center of a program and not a building, and which was a very valuable lesson. And I feel really sorry that I had to learn it at the cost of a community, and it is still a sore point that I could have done more. But it is what it is. And but I've been very conscious of the fact that while we're building with when we go into certain communities, we need to stop looking at is that, okay, a building can solve it. A building is only a part of the solution. You need to program it in a way that that it does more. So yeah, that's the story of this settlement. Now I would like to go on to the work that we do at Community Design Agency. Just a little bit about us. Community Design Agency was started in 2016 by my colleague Sandhya Naidu. She's also an architect. She's worked previously with Architecture for Humanity, done a lot of work in Haiti. And then in 2018, she expanded the team and I joined in, my colleagues joined in. And we're a group of architects, artists, designers, social workers, community partners. And basically our objective is to work with diverse communities, to work with communities which are underserved, communities which are underprivileged, and communities who want to do something to bring change into their environment. And something that we learned, like what I said in my previous, that we don't obsess over building. Like if we go into community, like if we think that, okay, we don't need to build something, we are open, enough to accept that not everything can be solved with architecture. And that has been a liberating feeling, that has been a liberating space to work in. Because sometimes I feel like we really take our architect identity very serious, and that is what I've learned in all these years, is that you while you're working on the margins, you need to see what you can use your architecture training as a skill. Don't make it your entire identity. It's not good for you. It's not good for the community. So first project I would like to talk about is the Sanjay Nagar redevelopment project, which we're doing in Ahmed Nagar. Ahmed Nagar is 250 kilometers away from Mumbai. It's one of the largest district in Maharashtra. So this is a slum, and how this slum redevelopment came to be was that we have a social partner, Snehale. Snehale is an is a social organization. They work with the sex workers, children of sex workers. Now they've expanded to working in slums, where they set up bal bhavans. Bal bhavans are small schools which they run to aid children with their education. And how this slum was chosen and there are no unnotified slums in Ahmednagar. And how this was chosen was because this was the only slum in Ahmednagar which was on municipal land, which made the whole process of doing in situ redevelopment much easier. So uh, and the main pillar of this project has been participatory planning, where we've tried to include the homeowners from the start, from the time we wrote the DPR to how the houses were designed, to how to even choosing the color of their wall, to choosing who their neighbors were, uh, and I would like to share an interesting story. Like, we had this when we first uh, took this option of to the community that there is an option, like, would you like to redevelop and have new homes? And they agreed, but they agreed on the condition that we all need ground floor homes. And we are like, no, but you cannot get ground floor home because there's not enough land, and you would end up with really small homes if you continue, and you would have no open spaces. But the community was sort of like very stubborn that no, 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 you want our zameen, you, because and naturally we understood it, because uh, these people, so many people have tried in the past to evict them for their homes. So the land is a very touchy topic. The land is all they have. So we actually took them to Hunashala. Hunashala was, our initial design partners in the process in this project. And there, because Hunashala had only done a slum redevelopment project, and we organized this workshop, and we said that, okay, this is the size of your home, like you see in the photograph, that this is your home, and if you want, we'll give you ground floor homes uh, if you can fix it all in this land. And while they were doing it, and they tried and tried for like about 2 hours, and at the end of it they were like, yeah, you're right, we will need to have multi-story homes. So yeah, from there, that was how the first design workshop, to convincing them to what the story of their buildings would be, was how the process started. So now this is the overall site plan. We've divided the community into 7 clusters, and each cluster has some open spaces. And each cluster, and the community themselves has chosen which cluster they want to live in, like who their neighbors will be, uh, what they would want to keep in their open space. Because certain communities have, like, for example, there's a community called the Junni community. They're Dalit Sikhs, and they rear a lot of animals. So they wanted an animal space. They wanted a space to keep their animals. And that is something that, I feel a lot of redevelopment projects that are conceived in the country only look at housing from a house point of view. And you need to we need to start thinking about redevelopment as rehabilitating communities, and not just rehabilitating individuals. So these are some of the visuals. I won't spend a lot of time on it. um, yeah, some open spaces. Yeah, this was the animal shelter. It still needs to be, this is just a rendering, and we still need to design it properly, but it has all been like included in the plan. uh yes, funding is something that I wanted to talk about, that especially, like, I feel in Bombay, since we're doing this, Bombay has done only one single model, which is the private public partnership, where they choose they would choose who the beneficiaries are, who the homeowners are, and then put them up. And while and then sort of uh, gild them that they got this free house. And I don't think anybody needs a free house. People, in Bombay, so many people in slums, they're the backbone of, they earn enough, and they earn if and they keep doing additions to their houses in their slums. They're always like adding some tiles, they're always some adding some roof, or always something. That means they have the money to spend on their house, and the government needs to acknowledge that. And I think why they don't do it is because if they put money, if they ask for money, that would mean that they would they would become equal stakeholders in the process, and they can ask questions that, we don't want to live here. And that is something that we are also trying to, that we've opened up this project to diverse funding, where the government is supporting under the supporting the project in the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and the homeowner is contributing up to 1 lakh each. Then the Ahmednagar Municipal Corporation is supporting by giving services. And then there are philanthropic contribution, including the Curry Stone Foundation, which is also funding. And then we're also trying to create funding especially for open areas. This is an ongoing project, just quickly showing you some under construction photos. Yeah, so this is the favorite part of my project, and something that I work very closely involved with is, yes, construction design is something, the architects are, that's our training. We should be doing it. There is nothing very special about producing good renderings. But what this project makes it, why the project is very special is because, we have a very robust social process. Because as architects, we wouldn't have been able to do everything. Yes, we were doing participatory planning. Yes, we were sitting across people, but we needed a strong social partner, which Snehale, our local organization, is, because they know the community. But we also needed a stronger link between the community and us, so that communicating becomes easy. So we chose to hire these community representatives from each cluster, and we call the community only to nominate that we need people to work with us. They'll be paid, and they came up with. So the person that you see in this photograph is Rutik. He was one of the first CR from the community. When he joined us, I think he had only finished his 10th. And also, he lives in the slum, comes from a very difficult financial, but such a sharp boy. And within 6 months, he picked up. So what right now he's doing in the photograph is, we were having this very heated argument that some of his community members weren't able to understand how the houses will be laid. And this guy just picks up the chalk and just draws the entire map to scale. And we were stunned. I'm like, wow, I've never seen something like that. It took me 2 years to draw something to scale in architecture school. And while I'm stunned, it is also a comment on my own privilege to some extent, that we just think that we know all, and people from these communities don't know. And yeah, I think it was such a learning experience for me, that that people don't need architects. They know, they just need the tools to do what they have to do. So we have, I've done some really interesting work with them. We've done gender workshops. We have done workshops on helping them to communicate better, helping them to manage their work. And they're just very smart people, and it's a completely women, like 80% of the CRs are women, and some of them would have been married by now. And it is very heartening that they've continued to be in studies. They've continued to uh, be in this job with us. And during the pandemic also, they were the ones who sort of reinitiated. They kept coming to work, and we came up with this hybrid method of working together while I'll be on phone calls. And we started this very interesting program called the Community Radio. And Community Radio was actually just a continuation of what I'd done previously in while working on the slum archives. Was that there is a need to, while we're working with marginalized communities, there is also a strong need to sensitize the rest of the city towards the need of giving housing, the need of working on housing on marginalized. Because somebody has to break that thought that, oh, these are freeloaders, they shouldn't need, why should the government give housing? Because people don't realize the extent of contribution these communities give to our cities. So we devised a very interesting program where we picked up interesting stories, and for about 6 weeks, one story was played out on the radio from the community. And these CRs only picked up those stories, they scripted it, they went and narrated it, they helped other community members to go in recording studio, help them record. So, and that was a very interesting program. And yeah, this is the favorite part, where we actually realized that building is not, um it's only part of this process, was when the last year when the pandemic happened, and obviously the entire country was struggling. And since these communities, especially Sanjay Nagar especially, 90% of the people are all daily wagers, and they didn't have they didn't have enough to eat. All their work was stopped. And these CRs from the community got out and spearheaded an entire relief program. They were getting out while we were stuck in home. They were going out every day, getting supplies, giving supplies, and they did that for almost 3 months. And that is something that makes me really, really proud. That okay, whatever homes we're building, like this is the true impact. Uh, so there's some photographs from the relief. Okay, I'll just take a quick water break before we go on to. Uh, uh, Going on to the next project. This is Naturopathy colony. I think some of you who are in Bombay are familiar um, with R&R colonies. R&R colonies were set up because in the late 90s, World Bank gave a lot of fund to the city to redevelop a lot of projects, and that build flyovers, road widening, and all those projects which the World Bank gave money to resulted in a lot of displaced population. And there were lakhs and lakhs of people in the city suddenly needing home. And so MMRDA in the city then made these resettlement colonies, very poorly built. It's like a rubber span. There a lot of bylaws were relaxed. There is just 18% of open space in some of them. They don't get sunlight. There is a very high TV rate. So we've been working in this community to see like what can be done in terms of improve them. And while I just want to make it very clear before we go into that, while we're doing a lot, working a lot, and trying to figure out solutions, this our stand is that no matter what we do, these spaces will always be unlivable. Nobody should be living like this. And the policy has to be discontinued at some point. Like this is absolutely terrible, these conditions. Like you can see 6 hectares, 69 building, a density of 5,585 people. Like it is massive. uh, and and this is not at the highest capacity. I've only taken like this, I've only calculated the density by assuming that there are 5 people in every house. But there are sometimes in these 220 225 square feet apartments, there's sometimes up 16 people living. So we started working in the community in 2016, 2017. With the first thing, as an architect, you would go and look at the space and see that, there's, these lanes, let's put a bench and let's, clean it up. And that's what we did, just like, let's reclaim all this space, whatever it is. Uh, so, we did like some massive cleaning campaigns, and it did become really clean. But a few months later the garbage came back again. uh, and then like a year later was we found a breakthrough when we started working with the street vendors. And the vendors came because we've been going to the community. There was an altercation which had them out of business for almost a week, because there was an altercation between a parking and a local guy, and which led to somebody dying. Like somebody had a heart attack and dying. And MMRD ordered all the street vendors to leave. And there are about 125 street vendors who've been there for ever since they moved to the colony in 2005. So they were really confused as to what was happening. So, we started having meetings with them, and the first thing was to make them understand the Street Vendors Act. And not surprisingly, nobody knew about that there is an act about them. And so we did a workshop in participation, in collaboration with UVA, because UVA works a lot on, UVA is a Bombay-based organization, and they work a lot on work with street vendors, also in R&R colonies. And while we were working with them, we realized one was, yes, there was a lot of spatial conflict, and we started making plans and seeing that, okay, let's organize them properly, let's create a space for parking. And but then we also realized that even though there is a spatial conflict, the they're used to living with that kind of conflict. They've been there for 12 years. So what is it that so the spatial conflict is not at the heart of what's causing this trouble. There is something else. And then we sort of dug deeper. We tried to liaison with the BMC to give them cards, and we realized that the street vendors that are in Naturopathy colony and any other R&R colonies, which are huge, cannot be given an identity card, cannot be surveyed under the Street Vendors Act, because they are not sitting on public roads. Technically, Naturopathic is a government housing, public housing, but the roads do not belong to BMC. The roads do not fall under public roads. The roads, the street where they're sitting belongs to MMRDA. So, and MMRDA does not have the jurisdiction to give. So it is a very complex land issue, which I don't think MMRDA, when they were building these colonies, even realized. But here we are with 125 people with their livelihood at stake. So then we tried to, like, sort of, also while we were working with the street vendors and making them realize that, okay, you're occupying this space, let's do it, let's see what we can do. We started also speaking to the authorities and MMRDA that you can say that you don't have the jurisdiction, but where will these go? There has to be some solution to this. And but they're also at their wits end, they didn't know. So sort of we came up with this middle ground that say that they will mind their business, and whenever something happens, they will move away. And in while we were doing that, the street vendors realized that a lot of conflicts were also were coming up because they were not united. The first thing they did after, like, 4 or 5 workshops was to come on the decision that they will they will form an association. And they formed an association, and when the election happened, they elected a Muslim president, a male Muslim president, and a Dalit woman secretary, something which I'm very proud of, that they did something like that. And while we were also, like, creating database for them, so that when they go out and they represent themselves, that who they are, and just giving them, imparting them with the necessary tools in terms of information about how they operate. And they also didn't, like, when we would be in the meetings, they would say, oh, a lot of people from outside are coming and selling there. And when we did the survey, we realized 95% of the street vendors in the colony are from the colony itself. So these are the details that we found out through the survey also help them look at themselves with a different light. And we did these mapping exercises to understand space. Then we did this another exercise of to know, so that they know who is next to who, and who is having 2 cards, who is having single card, and make them, and this understand. And a lot of spatial workshop that we did was around the idea of how to cohabit a space, because a lot of spatial conflict were arising, ki ye meri jagah hai, and this is my place, main yahan se nahi hatunga. And then we would be like, okay, it's a street, it's used by everybody. Now how do you to sort of drill that concept of a temporal use of space, of temporal ownership, or something that we inculcated through a series of workshops. And while we were doing all this, something very beautiful happened. There was Eid, and Naturopathic, I forgot to mention, is it's a 70% Muslim Muslim colony. Actually, 74%. We did a demographic survey and found out that 74% of the families that live in Natropari colony are Muslim, and they moved. But the street vendors is a mix. It's like a 50-50. Actually, 40% Muslims, and then there are the Hindus and the Buddhist Dalits, and you know, a mix of a lot of caste and communities. And on the Eid, one person bought a lot of sheer kurma, and there were very limited bowls. So, everybody started eating from the same bowl. And I didn't realize. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And then later when I went back the next day, because we had community organizers, they were very emotional. I said, what happened? They said, this has never happened. These people don't talk to each other. They don't go at each other's homes. They're not invited to each other's weddings, and they're eating out of the same bowl. And that was one of the days, when I went back thinking that, what we're doing has some value. And yeah, it still makes me really emotional thinking about that, because I didn't realize it was happening in front of me. So then, what we had them do was come up with a rule book of how they will manage themselves, how will they organize themselves, including, like, if an altercation is happening with the police, if somebody is being threatened by a parking guy, or uh, how to how to solve conflicts, how to take care of their expenses, because in association they have to give a fee. And then, we have made this in both Hindi and English and given them. And now what has happened is that, because we did this work for over 2 years, and slowly they were able to realize that, initially, because it's as a design organization, it's very difficult to sort of present yourself because people are not aware. But over these series of workshops, they were able to understand our role. And now I met them again just after the pandemic, and they had organized a meeting, and I was very surprised that, they were only asking me questions that were about spatial conflict. They realized that, okay, this is where we would need your help, and rest everything we can manage. So now, we have slowly moved away. They're managing by themselves. They only call when, there is a problem at a higher level. If there's something with the agency or something, they need our help with. So after the I mean, while we were working on the street vendors, we were very, we were baffled by the fact that, why are these colonies, why are these lanes between these buildings so dirty? Already there is such less open space. Why would you, put so much garbage and, cover it? And then the simple answer was that they don't have ownership. They were Nobody asked them if they wanted to live in these colonies. They were just put there. They were not asked like, what kind of neighbors do they want. And now they just don't care, and their homes is spick and span. So we started, we created a small program to bring people, to create something around space. And so before we went on to lanes, we said that, okay, let's look at common areas within the buildings and see how they respond to taking care of it and creating something around in those common areas. So we created this idea of having a common bin, because it was right before Ramadan. And Ramzan, in Ramzan, they have a lot of, they eat a lot, and there's a lot of wet waste. And I said, would you be interested? And we are like, would you be interested in putting your wet waste together and sending it to the compost agency, because there's a compost unit right across. And incidentally, there were very interesting conflicts that came, because some vegetarian families were like, oh, they're putting their chicken bones into it, mutton bones. We would not like to. So, but after talking to everyone, people agreed. And in few buildings, like you can see in this picture, they got so excited that they put these chains so that nobody takes their dustbin away. A lot of the kids came, they did the painting, and we created like this small program in almost 10 buildings out of 61. And while we were we started the space program, we also started mapping if there is there a change in how the garbage on the lane, and we saw like there is a considerable decrease in what we were seeing on the street, like you can see in this picture that people were throwing less garbage on the streets. And so then we realized, how let's just accelerate this and create something very fast, something very frugal, but that excites people, that brings people together. So we took a small portion of lane, get certain women asked that would you be uh, interested in weaving some benches. So the local welder welded this frame. There's this woman who came and did the weaving. The painters were everybody from the colony, like whoever, whatever skill they could, we could use, use them to make the street. And this I'm sorry if this is anxiety inducing in the pandemic, but this is, I assure you, this was a month before the pandemic struck, on December 25th 2019, where we organized a party on Christmas to inaugurate this space. And we've realized, in while working in certain communities, it's very important to create um, to create these what do you say, occasions where people can come together, but because usually they don't. So it always helps to create a celebration out of small things. um, so and while a few weeks after, a lot of kids started coming, they started calling it the garden of the community, even when there is no grass. um, and then like after 25th of December to, and then March, we had the lockdown. And a few weeks later, we called and we asked, oh, other people, because this was the only open space, and we thought, this would be a great time for the community. But the lane became defunct. And the reason we found out was that because so many kids were coming from all over the colony, it really irked the citizens, and they started throwing water to dissuade the children to come play. And we were like, oh my god, like how much do you gonna think, how much do we have to program? And we were very, very angry, like even after doing, thinking so much, doing something participatory, and still we are failing. But anyway, we take it with the stride. You kind of have to keep going. And then for a few months we couldn't visit the community, and then we started again. And when we restarted again last year, we thought that since a lot of older people were not available to uh, to to work, because the pandemic had sort of thrown them off their livelihoods, and there were a lot of problems. We thought that maybe this is a good time to start working with the youth. And we'd already tried working with youth before the pandemic, but somehow we were not able to get the kind of attention that we wanted. But something shifted in the pandemic also, maybe because the kids were uh, very fed up of being cooped up. But when we started calling them for meeting, they started coming. So we did this safe we did this workshop with the few girls. There were like some 7 8 girls and 7 8 boys from different buildings, and to build their understanding of space. And we did it's called the safety workshop, where we gave maps to groups of girls and boys, and say that you go around and mark spaces where you feel safe, you feel moderately safe, and you feel completely safe. And 3 days later we sat with the results, and there was a lot of overlap in terms of where the girl felt the most unsafe, the men had marked it the most safe. And then we sort of we spoke to them. We tried to say, have them talk to each other, that why is it that the girls are feeling so unsafe in places where you feel so open and safe. And that was the start of, this is, and to reiterate the fact that this is a Muslim colony, it's a very conservative place. We have to be very careful about how we are initiating these discussions, because usually the girls and the boys, they don't talk to each other. There's always that that apprehension of being perceived differently by the other gender. But we've been very, very lucky in the kind of group that has come forward to work. And then we gave them this exercise that why don't you choose a space where you both feel unsafe, and we will make it safe for both of you. And so they chose a corner in the colony where they used to say that a lot of people who smoke we to smoke, and doing all kind of antisocial activities used to go there. And they chose this spot, and we were very surprised that wow, this is being very, very ambitious. But we kind of like, because they were showing a lot of interest, said, okay, you want to take this spot, let's take this spot. And then we created an artwork. uh, we just had to do the artwork, and the kids and the youth sort of like took it over. What's written in the center is Hakse Govandi, and Hakse Govandi is actually the lyrics of this very popular rap song, which is sung by all the kids in that colony, because the rap is written by one of the guys from the community itself. His name is Moin, and he's a rapper. So the kids are very excited to have Hakse Govandi, and then we painted it with them. So many kids came, like it was very difficult to manage, but they had a lot of fun. They, before we came, they would be ready with like a speaker and would play all kinds of songs in the back. So this is what we did, this is the spot they chose. And then this is how the transformation, the MLA came to inaugurate it, because yes, again, there's the need to celebrate every small victory. uh, and the second wave happened, and this time we were surprised that the garbage didn't come back. And instead, in I think March second week or something, we received a photograph that a lot of people have started using the space even at night. A lot of girls have started coming out and sitting there, and which was which is obviously, like, we as women go out, but for the community, it's a huge victory. And then this is, I think I'm on time. I will take 10 more minutes to this is the last initiative of this project. So while we were working on this one spot, a lot of kids started coming and hanging around, because they were very excited that after 1 year of being cooped up, something exciting was happening in the community. And there was this one kid called Shoaib who started hanging around with us, and he would just be around. Like, if we were measuring, he would come hold the tape and just started spending time with us. And we started inquiring about who's this kid, like, where is he coming from, like, what is happening, what is his story. And then he realized that he was the only child being brought up by his grandmother. His both his parents are alive but no longer in his life. He used to go to an Urdu medium school, but because of the pandemic, the Urdu medium schools are no longer doing digital classes. And that's when we realized that, the kids actually don't have any space in the community where they can, feel safe, where they can, feel wanted, where they can, there's no playground, but nothing to learn. And for this 1 year, this kid has been running around, doing nothing. And that's when the idea of creating a library came from. We call it Kitab Mahal. There is a Kitab Mahal in Fort, but who cares? We can have multiple Kitab Mahals. So yeah, this is where the first project that I talked about was the school that we built in Bhuj. And this time, uh, because I was so touchy about programming it well, we didn't think about the building at all. We first spoke to this organization called Sahyog Trust. They set up community libraries everywhere, because we were like, we will build, we're architects, we're designers, we'll build the most shiny thing. And but who's going to run it, how it's going to be self-sustainable, how will the community be excited of coming, why will the community feel excited of coming there? So Sahyog Trust came, and they organized this workshop with the youth and the kids on library, on what a library is, what it can do, how to how to manage books, how to start reading. Because we realized, in that workshop, we realized that um the kids and even the youth from the community associate books with only learning and knowledge, and not with joy or I think that's not just in these communities, but otherwise we're forgetting to read for joy. So that is something, and the workshop was actually called the Joy of Reading workshop, and the kids loved it. The youth also loved it, and they were like, okay, we will be trained. We'll get trained as librarians, as keepers of the library to take it forward, and that sort of that workshop emboldened us to take it forward. Some images. And luckily, very fortunately, we were able to find a space right behind where we've done this wall. There were two rooms that are available, that are empty. We still don't have them. But so we're also thinking of, because it's the north end the of the colony where we have some open space. So we also want to sort of slowly claim it to create not just a library inside, but like a play space outside as well. So here are some of the visuals that we're ready. We have the drawings, we have the BOQ, we have everything. All we're waiting for right now is the allotment letter. And because it really boggles me that more than 25,000 people live in Naturopathy colony, and they still don't have any right to their spaces. Whatever they want to do, they have to write letters, they have to write they have to do like 15 different chakkars at different offices to sort of build a little library. And with everything else, whatever they want to do, even if they want to start a balwadi or like an anganwadi or whatever. And that is also something that we're trying to work on, while we're closely working with the MLA. We're closely working with uh, the local ward councillor, with MMRD, social development cell, to see how all these all these challenges can be straightened out for the community there, because just building won't solve them. So yeah, here is the end of my presentation. I would like to stop share.
Thank you.
Anuj,
Hi, Bhavna. Can you?
do we? Yes, I can.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you so much for taking us through these three examples in your practice so closely. And I think you've kind of been very empathetic and brave at the same time in acknowledging your failures also in this presentation. So I really want to congratulate you, and I think that is the thing that has kind of triggered a lot of questions in my head also, in how you kind of try to I mean, the first step that you very powerfully brought was that you have to move beyond from building. You have to move beyond building into strategies and really
Yeah.
identify the problems beyond just the desire to build. And I think that was very interesting takeaway for me. The second thing that I realized was the idea of I mean, throughout your presentation and all your examples, I think there was a conscious effort to build the agency of the actual person who's living there, and you did a lot of interesting. There were a lot of interesting openings in those directions. One is mobilizing and articulating one's own identity, in order to build or claim spatial agency.
Yes.
The second is, I was very intrigued by your cohabitation workshops, which actually is so directly related, but lending that idea of space to the people there, and not kind of allowing them to see that how space is an actual ingredient which brings them together or also kind of separates them together. I thought that was a very interesting thing to open up, and I would love to kind of have you open up how you conceptualized and work this out with them, and through these things also building ownership and agency, ownership and belonging to create agency, which means that that only when you can give them tools to find ways of owning a space can you also kind of make them claim and have agency. So I think those were very, very interesting kind of, I would say diversions, but reaching at, very interesting endpoints. And in this kind of summary, I want to kind of ask you three questions.
Yeah,
And
sure.
the first question, and I'll go one by one and have you answer them. The
Okay.
first is that I wanted to ask that um, what is because you worked on ground, like really with the people, and also like thinking of your first experiment with with Vascoda. Um, what is the role of architectural representation in participatory planning? And because I mean we are taught to walk through drawings and models and all such, these become really the tools and instruments of architecture. And what do you think is the role of these kinds of tools in participatory planning?
So that's a very good question. I mean, it is something that I also think because I feel like whatever tools that I've worked in my engagement with the communities of you have to constantly reinvent the tools. You need to understand that every community respond to different tools. Every community uh, is for example, like in the first example that I took, I showed them that model. I made it a point, to use bamboo, to use, to materials that sort of, they understand. And but that is not to say that we need to we should box them,
Mm.
because sometimes they can surprise you. So I think it's a constant learning process. You have to keep like, but I feel don't get caged into the tools. Tools are there to help. If they're not helping, try something else.
Yeah. What I also mean
uh
to say in a matter of
can't hear you.
hello, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I
What
can
I
hear you.
also mean to ask, to expand my question, is that these tools are often tools through which we understand, make, or convey, or communicate, make how the outline of the container of habitation will be made. But you yourself kind of made very clear that that is not probably what the design solution for these communities may be. And also
Yeah.
that the communities are not thinking of life and inhabitation through the idea of the container outline. So in that
Yes.
kind of context, in that kind of situation, do you think that the tools of participatory planning for an architect when one goes on the ground should be completely different than models and drawings?
No, I don't think so. They should be completely different, because ultimately with the communities, we also want the communities to make agency, to create agency, right? We also want them to take complete ownership.
Hmm.
Now the bylaws are not different from them. The municipal corporations are not saying that, okay, you can submit this plan differently. Like, ultimately, there is not a different system that is existing for them. They kind of have to work in the same system. So even like, let's say in the Sanjay Nagar project,
Hmm.
we have, even though we have used different, like, giving an example, we were doing a neighbor finalization workshop. So we what we did was we took some blocks and colored them,
Hmm.
and each block, we make it, and we sort of staggered it in a way that represented their building, so that they knew like where their houses were. And now that, I mean, this is not a traditional architectural tool, but we're also making them, see, even if it takes 5 times, to understand what a plan is,
Hmm.
because they're signing on it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because we want them to know that you have to submit this plan.
Hmm.
So that ultimately, maps are like thousands, and plans are like, they're very old. Everybody can understand them. So
Hmm.
we also should underestimate the communities. But especially if when you're starting, then yes, they can feel a little. But
Hmm.
I feel they shouldn't be very different, because ultimately we want the community where we are. We want them to the same language.
Okay. So on that note, I have my second question that, in that kind of line of thought, what kind of architectural thinking should be made open source? In the sense that how if at all could we enable these communities with spatial tools that we feel are really going to be crucial in having agency over designing one space. And I'm really kind of intrigued about the cohabitation workshops that you did, because I feel that that's also a very interesting tool of space, and it kind of enters circumvents the
Yeah.
traditional representational modes, and still
Mm.
allows them to define temporal boundaries. And that's,
Yes, exactly.
yeah, so if you
Yes.
can kind of open up that, what tools like these can be lent to them, or and also allow them to make these temporal boundaries and stuff like that.
So, just a small digression because you asked what kind of architectural tools need to be. I'll make a small digression that, in all these years in practice, what I realize is that none of these communities need architects.
Hmm.
Like they just, because the problems, yeah, like for example, Sanjay Nagar, the housing, you today we open a competition, 500 amazing stellar entries on, how we can, everybody can design a housing. And the problem is that nobody is working on what will make that housing happen.
Hmm.
Like nobody is working on the financing mechanisms, nobody is working on livelihoods to
Hmm.
support that. So, in that sense, I feel like when we go, I'm like, okay, yes, we're working and we should work, but ultimately if you don't do the rest of it, your skills are not like uh, gonna do much.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was, I just wanted to say it. Coming to the question, uh I feel, whatever, like this cohabitation workshop, we didn't plan on doing it.
Hmm.
We were just, we very sensitive to kind of what the conflicts were. And while, it's like thinking on the feet, like, okay, these are the conflicts now, let's do it. But I'm not sure whether, I don't know, like this is still whether they will be using their tools themselves if we are out of the equation.
Ah. Hmm.
So I don't know, like, I haven't seen that happening. So, so far, whatever kind of tools that we've devised, we need to be there. I
Hmm.
don't think so far that has happened. I'll be very open that, they have taken those tools.
Hmm.
Yes, they have, in that moment, it has helped them to
Hmm.
understand, the spatial temporalities and conflicts and, what is happening.
Hmm.
But in terms of what they can adapt, I don't adopt in their regular way, I'm not sure that they will.
Okay, and you don't think that something like you already did, like the rule book, like the code of conduct,
Yes,
could also
yes,
be a potent tool to do that?
yes, rule book, yes. I think rule book was like a mix of was something that, the product.
Yeah,
So, we use those architectural tools
yeah,
to, come to that rule book.
correct,
So
correct.
you'd sort of, in its sense, what the architectural tool we are using cannot be used. But we sort of use the understandings and learnings that we were able to into the form that, yes, rule book is something that they will use.
Yeah, but I would say that that is as much a tool now, and that's what is
Yeah.
is the kind of new way of looking at spatial building spatial agency in that sense.
Yes. Yes.
In the third, and I'll come to my third question and then open it to the audience. In the third case, I think your presentation clearly kind of showed that it is the hard boundaries and the lack of space of these buildings that have not allowed them to come together for the longest time.
Yes.
That there is actually, like, people, when you see these buildings, you feel that they are like literally trapped, and there's no space to spill out. And so I want
Yes.
to really ask that, why is subtraction not used as a strategy yet in these spaces? And by subtraction, I mean that, clearing some space off and creating some space just by removal of some boundaries.
Well, we that's the plan, but we just don't have the agency. We just to give you an example, that we submitted the papers for getting these 2 rooms for the in March,
Yeah.
and we are in August. We still don't have allocation papers for every little thing that you have to do. You have to go to MMRDA. So
Okay.
the larger goal is I mean, I look at this building and that's the first thing that comes to mind. Take this block out, take this away. But it is, I mean, logistically, bureaucratically, it is a nightmare.
Okay.
It
But
is
but the
very difficult to get anything done.
but the
And other thing, Anuj, the problem with subtraction is that every little piece of land has been allocated to somebody.
uh-huh.
Everything, there is a contest happening, the spatial contest happening on every little bit.
Hmm.
And it is a huge social challenge. We can take that clearing, but where will the people go?
Right.
Where will those people go?
Right.
So bureaucratic architecturally, like, it's a dream,
Yeah.
but bureaucratic, it's that's why when I started talking about the project, I said that we
Right.
are doing these things, but they shouldn't be built in the first place.
Hmm. But something like the Kitab Mahal that
Yeah.
you suggested that you would like to leak out in the space
Yes.
around, but
Yes.
still its boundaries are so intact. And would
Yes.
there be a possibility for its boundaries to become more dissolved or porous or
So why we chose that space was because there's an open space
yeah,
in front.
yeah,
So there is that possibility, because we also thought so many kids will be coming. There should be something, because we were getting there were spaces, couple of rooms elsewhere in the colony between those lanes, and
right,
we consciously made the choice to have that. Something that I didn't talk about the presentation was that we also, the next step would be to create these lanes into proper streets
hmm,
to open, and that's where we want to try this subtraction by at least starting to break down that wall.
correct, yeah.
But we haven't done that. We would want to. That's the dream.
And the
But
residents would be open to that? The residents, without having the MMRDA bureaucracy
the
involved.
residents are actually very open to that.
Okay, okay.
The residents are absolutely open. Like, not everybody, but there was this one lane we were talking to some residents. They're very open in. So the moment they see an addition, the moment they see this value addition to their space, they're very open.
Okay,
Residents are the least of. I mean, they get very excited with
yeah.
visuals.
Okay. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, Bhavna, I would now open the conversation to the audience, and we already have questions. But before that, I think
Yes.
the darkness in your room will eat you up soon.
Oh, okay. Just.
Yeah,
Okay. Sure.
if you can switch on some light, that will be nice.
Sure.
And
Right.
in the meantime, I'll just move on to look at the questions. Um, can I invite Rupali to open and make her comment first? If yeah, Rupali is here.
Yeah, hi. Can you can hear me, right?
Yeah, can we also see you?
No, I don't think Dipti is
Okay, okay, go on, Rupali.
okay. No, so thanks, Bhavna, for this really passionate presentation. I just kind of had one question, and it also comes from a lot of our own work on urban studies and the way cities sort of work. In the sense that people inhabit cities in complex ways. There's all kinds of tactical ways in which people operate, settle, work things out. So I'm just wondering how this is kind of the tacit understanding of how people use cities. Sometimes, often in very cunning ways. In a good way. I'm saying cunning in a good way. How like how do you in some ways draw on this kind of tacit understanding of the way people inhabit spaces and cities in a participatory process? And I think it'll be
Yes.
nice because you had a lot of these your own observations and of this kind of reflecting on this practice over the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, you said, right? So in that sense,
Yes.
you think, because there is also a certain frame through which participatory planning works, So I just wanted you to reflect on that a little bit. Like, do you think sometimes we tend to dumb down certain things and,
Oh, yes.
or like, so how then could that sort of learning be in some ways, I don't know, maybe pushed ahead? How do we kind of draw in this kind of understanding, slightly more complex
Yes.
in which cities work,
Yes.
into participatory methods of working? So yeah, that was the question.
That's absolutely true. And I think like we've all, like personally, I've also done it, like this dumbing down. And I was talking about that, something happens and somebody draws a plan and I'm like, oh my God, you can draw a plan. I'm like, it's just lines, like, come on, just because you're an architect doesn't mean everybody else cannot. And I feel whatever participatory tools, like in what we do in the practice is that, what you said, that we try to understand that tacit knowledge, that tacit ways of how people, like for example, when the first set of design workshops that we did with street vendors, we didn't do it. We did almost 10 meetings with them where we were just talking, trying to understand, measuring things, talking to them, how trying to understand the conflicts, social conflicts, spatial conflicts, and then based on that, we sort of came up with those participatory tools. So I would say that every community is different. People and because we're working in two different places in Ahmednagar. Ahmednagar, the knowledge is very different. The community is very different from, let's say, like Bombay. In Bombay, the communities, they know a lot more and they tell you a lot less. So there is this constant, like they're also checking you out and you're checking, while in Ahmednagar they're far more open about their ways of living, about what they do. So you know just, I think, just trying to understand the community is understanding and then build those tools on that understanding and knowledge, instead of just okay, this is the playbook and this is what we're going to, like, every participatory workshop is different. Every every design workshop is different based on who you're doing it with.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I kind of, it's nice that we're having this discussion, and I think there's a long way to go in sort of,
Yes.
developing this. And I think we'd be also interested in kind of bringing this in a kind of pedagogic discourse. How do you
Yes.
actually build this sort of understanding? How do you, I mean, in some ways, it's also about, the idea of equality, right? I mean, the
Yes. Yes.
philosopher Rancière sort of talks about the idea of philosophy, right? That it's equality doesn't come from reform, but it comes from moving from
Yes.
equality to equality. So how do
Yes.
you, and I think there's a long way to go in this kind of process of, both practice and pedagogy. And it'll be nice to kind of be able to work this together.
Yes,
So I would be
definitely.
really interested
I
in.
just give you, Rupali, just because you said this, I want to give you an example of, coming down to how we perceive. I did the safe understanding safe spaces workshop and the gender workshop. And we kind of did this also in Sanjay Nagar with the community representatives here. And, I sort of, when we did this because most of the youth in Naturopathy colony where we did this was, very divided by Hindu Muslim, and Muslims are conservative, and they don't go into each other's space. So the spatial use is very gendered. While when we did this workshop with the youth and the CRs of Sanjay Nagar, they don't have that. They're constantly into each other's space, and they started posing questions about transgenders and how transgenders, and while I had conceived that workshop in a very binary way, and I was really surprised that, wow, like, and I said it, I was very honest that I'm sorry, I didn't think like that. Like, I'm sorry, I'm the one who's looking at it in a binary way, while they started posing these questions about, how transgenders in the cities are, because some of them identify to that identity in their surroundings, and they were very sensitive about bringing those into the discussion.
Yeah, no, I think that's really nice. And I also, I think one thing perhaps is also to perhaps stop being surprised, because I think
Yeah.
the act of being surprised also kind of sort of starts creating, because there you go with certain assumptions, there you
Yes. Yes.
move with certain, but I think this the idea of equality perhaps requires a very different sort of engagement, of
Yes.
immersing yourself. You're as cunning as as the city is. And I think cunning
Yes.
cities are much more emancipatory cities, like I think there's
Oh,
much
definitely.
going on there. So, but
Definitely.
thanks so much. I don't want to take all the time here.
Thanks,
Okay.
Rupali.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Rupali.
would
Away from
invite.
this.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I would invite Prasad because he also wanted to make a comment. Uh, uh, Prasad, Dipti, if you can help me get Prasad. Prasad, you're mute.
Hi, hi Bhavna. Thanks. Thanks.
Hi.
Hi. Uh, Thanks a lot. It was very nice, very nice, and so many things that you spoke about which are so familiar and so close to uh, the work that we do also, and the way we teach also. So very nice. Thanks a lot. I want to kind of uh, push the uh, push the interrogate the idea of the community here, the, the legitimacy that we attribute to the idea of community. That community made processes are more legitimate than other processes which are made by probably state or somebody else, right? And I would kind of use the same example of the R&R colonies of Natwar Parek, or that Lalubai compound or Majas or whatever. One is that they were like they're perfectly legal entities. They're made by plans which were signed off by architects who are registered by the Council of Architects, right? They've been approved by a planning process which was put in place by the state, right? So they are perfectly legal things, impossible to inhabit it, because between two blocks, between two blocks of 7 stories, there is only 10 feet or 3 meters distance, and the ground floor apartments don't ever get any sunlight, right? Plus, recently there was also this study which spoke about the relationship between tuberculosis and built form, particularly in these buildings. So legal processes, state processes created this mass of buildings, and here, like you said, everybody got standard housing, and everybody and all the, and I remember being active in some of these discussions, and also I used to work with the MRDA for a long time. The people wanted these buildings because then these were assets, that they could kind of either rent it or live in it or also sell it sometime, and all of those things. That is one part. And how is state and state planners made? Of course, one is there is a corruption dimension to that. That it is the corrupt politicians and the corrupt developers who kind of manage bureaucracy and put in place this kind of horrible regulations which kind of produce the buildings. But then, does it mean that all of them producing this are corrupt, and all of them, and then which is also put in place through a community system of voting and appointments and all of those things. So that is one dimension to it, that this is done by the state. And how can state be so wrong, in terms of habitation? Because we have had 50 years of understanding planning and standards and all of those things, right? That's one part. Second part of it is that the role of civil society organizations, in this particular case, the poverty-based NGOs, the housing NGOs and poverty-based NGOs, like this particular housing of R&R, of the MMRDA built R&R across the city. In this, there was an explicit role of very big NGOs.
Yes.
Who were involved in allocating these houses, convincing people to move them into it. In fact, pushing people. And these NGOs, in many ways, are also civil society organizations which came from the communities. Right? So that's a second part, that that what is the legitimacy of these organizations then, when they kind of. And third thing is that currently, if you look at these buildings, I mean, we are familiar with many of these buildings over there. Actually, we also have a library, a small library in that space.
I visited that. When we started, that was my first case study.
So it was interesting because the communities, they're like members within them are at each other's throats. They're ready to kill each other for all kinds of, and there's so many allegations, and the cooperative housing societies is unable to manage. MMRD actually has a full-time registrar who kind of goes and takes over societies and kind of sorts problems and stuff like that. And this is like 15 years now. So how is the community become? How does the community become so like there is an idea of a collective wisdom, definitely. But these are, like you said, every inch is contested. Every unit is sold and is somebody's property, and everybody wants to extend, and everybody wants to, and they cannot. Like in a slum where they could extend, they could increase their height, they could do. Here they cannot. They are trapped almost, and that high density. So I was wondering, how is the we've in the three sessions that we've had so far, like in this series, this whole idea of the community-led design kind of comes in. The idea of community kind of community being the like I've met communities in Bombay where one part of the community is ready to evict the other part.
True.
The renters, the in a slum, when the redevelopment happens, the so-called owners kind of throw away the renters, and this throwing away does not have a image of the bulldozer. It happens quietly, and more number of people get evicted. This is the poor evicting the poor. This kind of thing. So we're thinking, we were kind of struggling also with the idea of this community and the legitimacy that we give to the community. So I was thinking, like, if you want to tell about stories.
Very, very interesting. And, this is something that I personally completely disagree with, that I don't think that community-owned processes are always going to be better, because communities are also trapped in their own structures. For example, Naturopathy colony, it's a 70% Muslim colony. The women have no right there. If we were to give that community a free run into how they would trap their women. They marry off their girls at 18. Similarly, in Sanjay Nagar, there are 22 different communities. Some of them get along, some of them don't get along. The subgroup is, this leprosy group, which is kind of shunned. Nobody I would like to give you an example, this how we dealt in when we were working with the street vendors. So most of the street vendors are permanent residents of the colony, while some of them rent the place out, like they're renters. They don't have ownership as such, but they work there. And when we were forming the association, we're helping them form the association. Some of the street vendors are just like, this association will only be of people who permanently own homes. And I was like, why? I said, I am a renter. Should I not work in Bombay? I said, before you were given these homes, you were a renter somewhere. Your kids are going somewhere. Your neighbor must be going and selling something in Crawford Market or in Chembur. Then, we should all work where we are born, where we own. And and it took 3-4 times, and we were like, I became very adamant. I said, we will not form the association if these are the kind of rules you will put in. Okay, this is not going to work. Everyone has the right to work. So we did like kind of a number of workshops around this, and finally the president they elected is a renter in the colony. So you kind of have to constantly challenge their own ways. Now coming to MMRDA, like certain officers that I've worked in, they're very good. They want to do work, but the system is just so claustrophobic. Just nobody can do. And like the MMRDA officers that you have, they are so corrupt. They have a standard rate. If you want to get a room allotted, you need to give them 20,000 under the desk, and they will give you a room to even start a hookah bar. But we want a library, we have to call the MLA, this commissioner, that commissioner. In the pandemic, have to like go to their office 100 times, and we still don't have a room for the library. It's just, I don't know how to answer the question. It's such a mess. Like, I don't know who thought of it. And a lot of it also comes from, I feel, Prasad, is they did not think. When they made those 61 buildings on 5 hectares of land, they did not give a single thought of how these will be managed. They did not think that all these people who are living on slums in multi-story building, you are giving them a lift. Who's going to pay for the lift? Now, a lot of there are in Naturopathy, there are about 34 registered housing societies, and each family cannot pay more than 200-300 rupees rupee bill, not bill, but that they're the maintenance charge. All that money goes only for the electricity bill for the lift. They don't have anything. If there are some repairs to be done, they don't have the money. And recently I was told that 5 buildings got a bill for their water for 10 years going into crores.
Yeah.
And they've been told that, you have to pay this, otherwise, where will they have these crores? And when these buildings were built, I think as an afterthought, they thought that they will give like a corpus of 20,000 rupees per housing to these housing societies. So that runs into about 20 lakhs for each housing corp. Of that 20 lakhs, 14 lakhs is with MMRDA in an FD, which these people cannot. Now the rest of the 5 lakhs something, some buildings have got, some buildings don't. But if they want to, even if they want to use some part of the 5 lakh, they have to write letters to MMRDA, get like multiple sign, multiple things for their own money.
Yeah, but how to
like it's such a I hate to use that word, but it's such a my-bap way of functioning that we know better. You have to come to us every time.
And it's a mess. And I think Lalubai compound is 7,000 families or some 6,000 families. Naturopathy itself is around 4.5, 5,000. The total bulk is around 30,000 families, which is around, I think, 1.5 lakh people, which is like, which is almost a small city in,
it's a tier 2 city.
So how did we go so wrong? Like this is a state doing for its poor with all the money, with all the with the best policy, with the best minds thinking about it, with all the IAS officers and the planners. How did we go wrong? So much wrong that we kind of, have made such a big mess
I
that
feel
it's impossible. Like,
I think it's one is that, these boards are just so not inclusive. The middle-aged upper caste men are controlling these decisions and they think they don't know, they don't care to ask anybody.
but that's what I'm saying,
And
Bhavna. There were NGOs. World Bank insisted on community representation for these projects.
I mean,
You
we
know,
know what the NGOs did, so
I think
it is.
I think this
Yes,
discussion
yes,
will go on a ranting
yes.
mode, but there are many more
But I just want to say, my dream is like, I want to earn some more money, and then maybe 10 years down the line, I'm going to open an office and just file PAILs against everybody. That's what I want to do.
you're trusting the judiciary.
Thank you for the reality check.
I will. I'll get.
Yes.
I'll take more questions because there are many more who want to ask things.
Yes.
Dipti, we can have Jibesh. Jibesh wanted to ask a question. Um, Jibesh, you are mute if you're trying.
Yeah, hello. Hello. I am sitting in dark, so my face is not looking great. So I really fascinated by this conversation. So I have a comment to offer because I think with Anuj's question and the presentation itself was very intriguing, and Rupali's question and now Prasad, there's a very interesting setup this stage where there is this administrative catastrophe versus the kind of innocence of life. But what I'm trying, innocence or cunning of life. But I was just, because of this idea of how do you be creative in urban, and this whole presentation was searching the creative in life. The joining the community word is a misleader, but it's basically how to join subjectivity through a creative movement, where you actually can discover something that is unknown. Now, the question is that unknown is what makes this act anything more than just a cosmetic transformation. The existential or the phenomenological velocity of that act is based on that unknown. Something unknown will emerge. A girl will sit at night in that bench. Now, how do we retain all of us in our creative life, and how do we see that unknown being played out, whether as creativity or resistance around us? I offer you a suggestion, which is I've been thinking for some time, and is something discussed with many friends, is that the idea of a naivete. I think we actually live and cultivate within us, with us, wherever we get the space. Not cunning only. Cunning comes with, but there is an idea of naivete. The naivete is, अच्छा ये नहीं कर सकते थे, अच्छा हमने तो कर दिया, And I think creative urban is produced by that. अच्छा यहाँ पे नहीं बैठ सकते तो हम तो आ गए, sorry, अच्छा क्या कर सकते हैं. Now this threshold crossing, which is actually all these projects, you see there is an element of threshold crossing, very, very softly, gently, sometimes dialogically, sometimes by the sheer praise of an action, is actually this threshold crossing is performance of a naivete. From all sides, and the naivete is not destroyed by the knowledge there. So the idea of the toolkit is actually knowledge that the planner and architects are very good at performing. But actually the way popular life and this kind of creative architectural living, if you can call it, is based on that naivete. If only it was knowledge and cunning, if our life was only that, we cannot have unknown, and we cannot produce the unknown in our creativity. We'll produce a very stamped reality, a reality that's already being done, and that won't have the kheer and the missing light at the night. This is not part of the imaginary. Those are the unknown variables that are whopping up and changing. So I've just consider it. It is, see, and if I say naivete, it's not Dostoevsky's Idiot I'm talking about. And it is not the naivete that is to be discovered from within us. We all inhabit it. And I think in a lover's discourse, naivete is the fundamental way in which works. Men knows it very well, and I'm just saying it is basically foundation by which creativity is exercised. Just a comment. This was not
The
listening to
figure of
this
the
for an
Yeda.
hour.
The figure of the Yeda, Jivesh.
What is the Yeda?
Yeda, the
Acha, yeah.
the Bombay film and Bombay everywhere. The figure of the Yeda is this. The naivete actually, the one who kind of does things very innocently, but also kind of charged up the whole thing, and kind of does things which are, and then become surprised that you could do it. You can.
Thanks, Jibesh.
Thank you.
Actually, I was thinking that, are you saying that to perform the naivety, or you're talking of actually being? Because if you know you're actually being, then you know that you are, and so you're performing it. So
No, you're
are
not
you naive?
performing or anything. It is there. If you're encountering an unknown, it is there. It is not ignorance. See, the problem is that we get into trap this. That's why I have a problem with expertized knowledge trying to make itself valuable in society, because it produces the binary of ignorance and knowledge, and no amount of equality can overcome that binary. And that's why you will end up fetishizing the ignorant, or making the knowledge devalued by saying, oh, they don't need it. There's a classic example of Hofsmann used to give. There was this academic goes to the workers to give a lecture, and says, you have worked with hands, you have toiled for hours, and I am so nothing in front of you. Then he said, why have you come here to give a lecture? If you have, in that time when you didn't toil, you actually studied. To actually show us what did you study. So the question is that society knows that its leisure is distributed, surplus. Nobody is unknown to it. I think when that unknown meets, when the two people meet, there's an unknown element. That element, when I'm saying that negotiation is not based on the cunning of each other. It has a base there, but it is also based on trying to figure out the unknown, and that's where the naivete comes into play. Not as an ignorance, not that I didn't know, I got it to know. So it's a little bit of always at play without knowing it is at play. But I'm saying that we sometimes look down on it.
Yeah. Approaching with the acknowledgement of unfamiliarity.
I think just to, thank you for saying this because, but in our case, it often comes, this naivete comes from a lot of frustration, because we are just like, we can't do this. Now we have this one wall, we'll just do something with this only. And then, let's just see what happens. Because like I said, the contestations are so many people, so much politics. Yeah. I would keep that in mind, the naivete.
Yes. There are 3 more questions, and I don't want to kind of lose them. So there is a question by anonymous attendee who's asking that not all community projects or not all community/projects have the fortune of having a great facilitation partner like CDA. In such cases, which is the majority who do you think can play this role? What is a possible way of replication of such models?
Why are you asking like the kind of role that regular architects can play, or I'm not clear.
I think the question here is that how do communities know that they have someone like a CDA who can be approached and who can help them, approach this kind of problem or situation more meaningfully?
I think I feel like not just I don't feel that there should be like we don't want to create an expertise, and I don't think community working and working on these projects should become an expertise in itself, because then we're falling the same trap of creating. Now we will from tomorrow we'll be like, oh, these are community architects or social architects, or like we have this whole field of social design.
Correct.
And I think I feel we're doing the bare minimum. like we're doing, this is, not some great thing. Like this is the bare minimum. We are cohabiting in the society. And I feel to approach, if just like, if you're an architect, if you want to work it, I would like, just approach it that people know,
Hmm.
your communities know, your communities have knowledge. They
Right.
just don't have the same privilege. They just don't have the voice that people want to hear.
Hmm.
Like, oftentimes, like when we're going to MMRDA, I would see that sometimes we have these two people, Parveen ji. She's a social worker. She's worked for 20 years. She lives in the same community, and she would go to MMRDA. They will make her wait. They will do certain things, and she has more knowledge than I have. She knows how things work. But the moment I'm with her, suddenly we'll be like, oh, so just going and working, being aware of your privilege, using it in the correct manner
Yeah.
would, like, be the closest of. And this is not a model. I would like refrain from calling it that this is a model,
Hmm.
but just like in the previous, I really like the talk of what Swati Janu gave, like design like people matter. And I feel like that's how we should approach it.
Thank you. That's very well said. Um, Ujan Ghosh is asking. I really don't have a question, but I just want to thank Rupali for sending me the links for these talks. After spending 45 years practicing architecture, designing millions of square meters of buildings, I still get inspired by the efforts of these young, committed people like Bhavna. I feel like starting all over again. I want to congratulate Bhavna for their work. I also want to thank her for such meaningful work for the society. So,
Thank you.
um,
Thank you.
and there is also an exclamation later by Mr. Ghosh that wonderful work, but doesn't go need to go through 5 years of architecture to do this. So, if you want to quickly respond to that.
I really don't know. Like I think that's a question. I mean, I think, like, would I be still be here if I didn't do architecture? But thinking about, like, I come from a very conservative family. I come from, like, my family which is not very well educated. I was the first woman to go to college on my father's side. And for me, like, architecture opened a very different kind of world which wasn't accessible to me. So
Hmm.
that's why, this whole talk on building on the margins, I feel very closely to, because in some way I have come from a certain kind of margins, not in the same way like, these communities, but yes, in certain senses I identify. And 5 years of architecture actually, like, it was painful. It was
Hmm.
a lot of heartache, and but it really opened the world for me. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Like personally, I think I'm glad I did it. But I don't think everyone needs to. But but again, I feel like it the kind of world we live in, it does give you legitimacy. Like I've seen that, somebody from the community maybe can design better than I have. I think I have very poor designing skills, but just because I have that prefix of an architect. So I think, within, if we look at the current power systems within the society,
Hmm.
so that architecture does give you legitimacy. Because I have a friend who's an architect who comes from a fishing community, and I've seen like how now he's taken seriously and all those things. So yes and no.
Thanks. There's a question by Prem Chandavarkar, uh,
Yes.
and I'll read it out to you. The work of people like Robert Chambers argues that many approaches in participatory development are well intentioned but often inadvertently produce an asymmetry between the experts and community, often through unnoticed methods such as the positioning and language of bodies in the spaces of interaction or in the appraisal tools used. Valuable potential is consequently lost. Can you elaborate on how you've avoided this trap in your work?
And I'm very, very thank you that he asked this question, because this is something that we're very, very aware. And I feel like by asymmetry means an imbalance of power, an imbalance of, who is doing what. And I feel how we approach is that, to when you approach a situation, like sometimes you see like, oh, we are the same. We are not the same. There is a power shift. We are definitely being coming from an expertise, or having a skill, are definitely looked at the community as something, okay, these people know more than us, or sometimes there is the mistrust. So I think when we approach a problem, we're very aware of it, and we're very open about it. We talk about these things. So how, let's say, position, like we never sit on a chair, or if we are sitting on a chair, everybody sits on a chair. If everybody is sitting on the ground, everyone is, like, they can sit on a chair, but we would never. And we talk about, we have these dialogues, especially a number of dialogues which I've had with the youth spaces, said that I'm here because my parents did something. I'm here because I can speak English. That's why you look at me like that that were giving me respect. And would you give the same respect who walked in, who was your so I feel, I don't know, I mean, I can't say that valuable potential hasn't been lost, but I would say that we are very, very aware, and we are constantly doing things to break this asymmetry, to break the power structures. And I don't know if we have avoided it completely, but yes, everything we approach, we never we see this, and we see that there is this danger that it may happen.
Thank you, Bhavna. I think that was the last question. Okay, there's one more uh, question that has popped in by Samir Hajirnis. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. He says, "Hello everyone. I would like to know the observations of architects in post-COVID design thinking with focus on health and safety through community-based projects. What are the additional opportunities in a city like Mumbai to make communities better?" Um, I believe that this is a very open question and not directly for you. And to answer that, I would invite Mr. Samir to look at the COVID glossary exhibition that our school has put together, which actually opens up this whole thing of what is the role of space in answering in response to COVID. And also it'll have a lot of interesting things that a lot of interesting stories and spatial reworkings that have been strategized by people from which we can learn. The link of the exhibition, you can find it on the homepage of our website. But I'll come back to Bhavna to thank her with all the insights that she has given through her engagements in these marginal communities. I think it was a very productive evening, very productive talk today. So thank you so much, Bhavna, and I hope that we are able
Thank you
to
so much.
person and
uh,
yeah, go on.
Sorry, Anuj. I thought, like, I don't know if we don't have time. I wanted to end the session with this poem that I'd written on housing.
Sure.
But if we don't have time, it's okay.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. You continue. Just give me 1 sec.
Okay. So in the meantime, I would just kind of invite all of you to attend our next session, which will be a fortnight later. And this time in the next 3 talks, we'll be actually moving across our country to look at ideas that people are experimenting in other places. In the next session, we'll have Dingai Chao Mutual Aid Society from China, and we'll have Chen Yun talking to us about their experiments in China on building agency. So please do join us 2 weeks down the line. And with that, I'll have Bhavna end this session with her poem.
Okay, thank you. This poem ये हिंदी में लिखी है, so I'm sorry जिनको हिंदी नहीं आती है, I'll just later I'll send you a translation. It's called पेड़ और उसके radical ख्याल. अपने माचिस की डिब्बी से थोड़े से बड़े किराए के मकान की खिड़की से बाहर देख, एक आम के पेड़ को देख, कुछ बेहुदा सा ख्याल आया. ये जो हजारों चिड़िया इस पेड़ की अनेक डालियों पर रहती हैं, ये किराएदार हैं या मकान मालिक? ये चिड़िया पेड़ को चुनती हैं या पेड़ चिड़ियाओं को? क्या उन्होंने भी पेड़ों और को धर्म और जात में बांट रखा है? नीम के पेड़ पर मुसलमान चिड़िया रहेंगी और आम के पेड़ों पर हिंदू, और बाकी सब अल्पसंख्यकों को सिर्फ छोटी मोटी झाड़ियां ही नसीब होंगी. क्या वह चिड़िया जो थोड़ी हताश लग रही है डाली का कर्ज नहीं चुका पा रही, और वो जो नीले पंख वाली चिड़िया उसे चिढ़ा रही है, क्या अपने पुरखों की डालियों में की हुई इन्वेस्टमेंट का फायदा उठा रही है? मैं ऐसे ही बेहुदा ख्यालों की ट्रेन पर सवार हो चली जा रही थी जब आम के पेड़ से आवाज आई, चिड़िया न मकान मालिक है न किराएदार, वह बस अपने घर की रहवासी है। तुम इंसानों ने ये ख्याली खिताब बनाकर घर की पवित्रता को सिकोड़ उसे मकान जैसी निरस चार दीवारों में ढाल दिया है। और कितनी आसानी से भूल गए हो कि इस दुनिया में हर जीव का घर होता है। मैं कौन होता हूँ चिड़िया से किराया मांगने वाला, जब जिस जमीन पर मैं खड़ा हूँ उसने मुझसे कुछ नहीं मांगा। घर तो लेन देन से परे है, पर ये बात तुम्हें कैसे समझ आएगी? तुम तो कहीं भी बेफिजूल की लकीर खींचकर जमीन, पानी और हवा को बांट देते हो और फिर उन लकीरों को खुदा बना लेते हो। भूल जाते हो कि घर सपना नहीं, हक है सबका। अब घर का सपना देखोगे तो सपने वाले सपने कब देखोगे? मैं ध्यान से पेड़ की आवाज सुन रही थी। इतने में मेरे मकान मालिक का फोन आ गया। किराया मांगने के लिए फोन कर रहा था। मैंने सोचा मकान मालिक को भी पेड़ की बात बताऊं और थोड़ा किराया कम करवा लूं, पर मैंने उससे कुछ ना कहा। कहीं वो गुस्सा होकर मुझे पेड़ पे ही रहने के लिए ना बोल दे। अब बेचारे आम के पेड़ को क्या पता कि मेरा मकान मालिक उसका भी मालिक है और ताक पे बैठा है कि कब उसे काट कर कमरे बनवाए और किराए पे चढ़ाए। अब पेड़ को कौन समझाए कि उसके रैडिकल ख्यालों की जगह अब सिर्फ सेमिनारों और टॉक्स में बची है। तो घर का सपना देखता ही रहेगा और खुद को मकान मालिकों और किराएदारों में बांटता ही रहेगा। शुक्रिया।
Thank you. I'll not say anything. Thank you and a good evening.
थैंक यू। थैंक यू।